Bollywood é talvez a maior indústria de cinema do mundo, se não, enfim, depende dos critérios, o maior número de filmes produzidos, os maiores budgets, compete seguramente com a indústria dos Estados Unidos. Portanto, é um termo para que estamos habituados a ouvir, mas provavelmente muitos de nós não saberão que Bollywood tem uma enorme contribuição de Goa. Porquê? Quando os portugueses foram para Goa e tentaram cristianizar a população local, fundaram uma série de escolas, uma rede de escolas fantástica, as escolas paroquiais, que ainda hoje são muito participadas, e nessas escolas introduziram obviamente o português, obviamente o catecismo, mas também a música. Era uma linguagem universal e, portanto, fácil de aprender e um fantástico instrumento de cristianização. Alegrava as cerimónias religiosas, tornava-as mais participadas. E, portanto, ainda hoje os goeses têm uma cultura musical muito especial. Como é que essa cultura chega a Bollywood? É isso que ao longo deste episódio queremos partilhar convosco.
Well, I think to answer that question directly, we would have to go to the history of Goan presence in Bombay, particularly in the music industry. As we know, the Portuguese set up music schools in Goa, particularly in the parishes, and from there we had a whole lot of people being trained in music who couldn't quite get employed in Goa. So the only option for them was to migrate to Bombay or elsewhere, even abroad, East Africa and so on. When the first silent film, the Lumiere Brothers cinematograph, arrived in Bombay in 1896, the Goans were on hand to play musical instruments to drown out the harsh sounds of the cinematograph.
E naquele tempo, da mesma maneira como não havia álcool no resto da Índia, também não havia muita música ocidental. E os diretores de música de Bollywood eram chefes, eram mestres na matéria de música indiana. Indiana clássica, indiana folclórica, mas não tinham conhecimento das harmonias ocidentais. E foi nisso que eles precisaram dos músicos goeses e é isso que os músicos goeses não puderam oferecer ou não participaram.
Mas isso é uma das coisas que me faz alguma impressão, por um lado, Bollywood queria ocidentalizar-se, mas por outro lado, Bollywood é muito consumido na Índia e arredores e não é propriamente uma indústria como a americana que é exportada por todo o mundo. Porquê essa necessidade de se ocidentalizarem? Porquê esse gosto por uma música mais ocidental e não por uma música indiana?
Não, a música sempre foi indiana, mas nessa música indiana, se eles precisassem de um baixo, de um violão, de um violino que tocasse um pouco ocidentalizado, eles não tinham a ideia da harmonia, porque na música clássica indiana não existe harmonia. É monotonal, não sei como é que se diria isso em português, né? É só um tom e sobre aquele único tom eles improvisam durante horas. É uma coisa fantástica. Mas para estas harmonias e orquestrações, quando eu falo de ocidentalizadas, não quero só dizer ocidentalizadas mesmo. Há muita música indiana, por exemplo, no ritmo de valsa, que é 3/4, né? No ritmo de valsa, por exemplo. Então, naquele tempo, tocavam isso com tablas, com citaras e tudo mais. Mas se eles precisassem de um violão que tocasse aqueles acordes, e eles não conheciam acordes, né? Não conheciam acordes. E foi isso que os goeses trouxeram para a música de Bollywood.
By the time sound came into films in the 1930s, it was again the Goan musicians who were the arrangers, the composers. But sadly, their names did not always figure in the subtitles because the director's name went on to subtitles.
Os goeses sempre foram muito contentes em trabalhar para alguém de outro e não para serem chefes. Nós sempre tivemos esta mentalidade que não sei se é servil ou se é sossegado, como nós gostamos de dizer que somos, né?
The Portuguese did not allow higher education You know, they did not allow. There was a certain rule, and even if you had to do medicine, you couldn't do things like, you couldn't get a degree of MD, for instance, and things like that. For that, you would have to leave Goa, because all you got were licenses, you know. So a lot of Goan doctors, you had LMEs and LCPS and those kind of licenses. They were not, and there were no specialists. So they kept them in that sense. The Portuguese kept the kind of education that they were providing to their colonial subjects very different from the way it happened in the rest of India. So you had so culturally it was developing in a very different way. But because of people who developed a certain amount of education, this, that and the other, and the villages couldn't contain those people, many of them left Goa, not to leave permanently, but to work outside. And much of the Goan population that came outside were from doing different things. You had professionals, you had doctors, you know, engineers, that kind of Goan, and journalists, etc. But the bulk of the Goans who came and started to do work elsewhere were cooks, bearers, you know, in restaurants, hotels, all this kind of thing, and also on ships, seafaring Goans. A lot of them were on ships. And of course, there was a certain amount of familiarity with the sea for the Goans, because they were on the coast in any case. So, you know, many of them were doing work of this kind. So, the image of the Goan, that is you might call it a pejorative image, but it need not necessarily be pejorative. A general image of the Goan was somebody who was happy-go-lucky, you know, who was laid back, you know, sosegado, you know, and you couldn't expect a Goan to come back after lunch to work. You know, and those kind of ideas which became very common. And then, of course, it was a question of, because they're happy-go-lucky, the other image of the Goan became one who was a good-hearted drunk, you know, in the cinema. And how did you distinguish him? You distinguished him from the rest of the group by giving him huge crosses around his neck, you know. So this became a kind of image that went on and on and on and on. And that they were very good at Western dance. You know, another thing was that most of the bands, if you went to any hotel, I'm talking of pre-independence era, even post-independence era, all the big hotels, like whether it is a Taj in Bombay or Grand Hotel in Calcutta, the original ones, you know, Claridge's in Delhi and so on and so forth. If you went there, most of the bands were run by Goans. And the musicians were also Goans. Because, see, there was much greater familiarity with Western music and Western instruments. So a lot more Goans learnt those instruments to play. So you had, you know, if you said violins, you immediately thought of a Goan violinist. You know, if you thought of anybody who playing the different kinds of wind instruments, then again it was the Goans. Piano, you thought in terms of Goans. So this kind of thing, and also in reality, you found that if you had to use an orchestra and you composed in a Western mode, then you couldn't get a classical Indian musician to play that, because they're not trained to play harmonies, you know, to work on harmonies. So you had to have Goan musicians. And these Goan musicians came into Indian film industry the moment Indian cinema started to speak and to sing. Because, you know, we always say that when talkies came to India, they were not really talkies, they were singies, because they started singing, you know. They hardly spoke, they just sang. So if you had music, then most of those musicians, because arrangers certainly were always Goan. You see, you may have a composer who knows Indian music, North Indian or Carnatic music or whatever, and comes very highly trained and can compose melodies, beautiful ones. But if you were to make orchestral arrangements, because they were not trained to do so. So they got arrangers, and the arrangers were always Goan.
Our greatest influence of Goan music was on Hindi films, not so in acting, because language was a problem. but Goa produced talented musicians during Portuguese era. I must say during Portuguese era only because during that time, that is way back in 1840s, the government of Portugal introduced teaching of music in every church. And we were having so-called parochial schools. Even I was a student of the parochial school in 58, 59. And there, compulsorily you had to learn music. Now this attitude of giving musical education has created number of musicians who knew to read and write music. That was very important. And when these people, because of the job, they went, particularly in Bombay, these were the people who could read and write music. And that was the reason they got lot of opportunities in Bollywood as far as composing of the music is concerned. But fortunately or unfortunately, most of our Goans who did a wonderful job in Hindi music industry never played the first role. They were always second fiddle. That is because of the compulsions. But they influence a lot the Goan music. I must say Goan music because Goan music has got roots in Indian music, there is no doubt, but it is not completely Indian music. In Bollywood, there were a lot of artists available who knew very well about Indian music, but the need was having a Western influence music artist, and that was available only in Goa. But unfortunately, in the recent times, I must say after the 70s, I must say after liberation, our parochial schools, first of all, in every church, there used to be one maestri. Maestri is a teacher who used to teach the 3 R's to the students along with the music. But if you go to see now, there is no mystery. And in the absence of a mystery in the church, the teaching of music has been totally lost. In fact, and that is the reason I feel music is not only, to satisfaction. For me, when you know music, you know to harmonize various chords which reflects on your life. The harmony that we are talking about, I always say there is less corruption in musicians, there is less, all sort of evils in artists, because they are the people on the stage, they have to coordinate their life, and as a result it reflects in their real life. So unfortunately nowadays, we have a lot of groups, musical group, we have a lot of musicians, but not even 2% of them know to read and write music, and that is the greatest misfortune that we are facing today.
And why is music and dancing so important in Bollywood? I mean,
look, there is a very old historical reason for this. The old Sanskrit plays, from which this is derived, the plays which were written in the 4th and 5th centuries and even earlier, with Kalidas and so on, from that this has come down. Now Natya Shastra, which is the art of theatre, specified that every single play had to have tragedy, had to have comedy, had to have all the rasas, the 9 rasas, and also songs and dance. Without it, the play would not take place. And we have inherited this tradition from them. Like the first Hindi movie, talkie movie, one of the talkie, Indra Sabha, where 120 songs it had.
But is there any rule to make now? I heard that it was 7 songs in every film. Is that true?
Well, generally there is no rule, but people like their song. The funny part is that if you go and see a movie, the minute the song starts, people leave to have a cigarette or something. But they want the songs anyway. They come and hear it at home. And they like to see their favorite actors singing songs. That's why when Shyam's film, many songs are background songs. That is not acceptable. They want their own favorite characters to sing.